rejected Bollywood a long time ago. This doesn't come from a sense of patriotism. With that same brush, I rejected Lollywood a long time ago as well. It was just never my cup of tea. That style of filmmaking, musicals, it was just never something for me. I mean, I'd barely seen, I think, in my life a handful. I think the only one I have seen from Hollywood was All That Jazz, a fine one, but yeah, never something for me. But the reason I'm talking about Bollywood today, I'm clearly not qualified to speak about specific films in particular. I haven't wholly rejected Indian cinema. I can swear by Satyajit Ray, Gangs of Wasseypur, of course, and even of late, there's been quality cinema that's been coming out from there, independent, non-Bollywood films. 2023, I think, gave us All That Breathes, a fine documentary about two Muslim brothers taking care of animals in New Delhi, specifically what's it called, kites. Then earlier this year, well, from 2024, we also had Everything We See as Light. I think that was the one. I think that was the name. Yes. Also, really well done. And again, something you do not expect from that sort of this monster that Indian cinema has become, because I think that because of its own domestic, the demand, and then of course international as well, all they expect is Bollywood. There's nothing, we don't get to see those quieter movies, we don't get to see more independent cinema from India. So again, rejected Bollywood, not Indian cinema. But, and the reason I'm bringing this up today is in light of the 3-day war recently between India and Pakistan, I wonder to myself, is it worth now making this appeal? We already have Indian cinema banned in our own cinemas here. Those movies haven't been coming here for I think almost a decade now. But is it now worth making an appeal to the wider viewing public, you watching this right now, to maybe reject also Indian content on streaming platforms? I was just casually browsing, as one does, on Netflix, and in things to come, worth the wait. And there's this sort of raft of Indian content. Good for them. But there was a handful of features, some titles that I was intrigued by, and I sort of wanted to read the premise. One was Sare Jahan Se Acha. Again, ostensibly a spy thriller, but of course, the only enemy India's ever had is Pakistan. And this one in particular is about how some of their spies try to thwart our nuclear program. There was another one, I think it was a Netflix release, but it's already made its way to the downloads, and that was The Diplomat, starring John Abraham. Again, about some sort of daring-do Indian thwarting Pakistani plans. And these are just two examples. There was that Hrithik Roshan starer, the Top Gun Maverick copy. I'm forgetting the name of that one, but that was laughable. Then there was that other one. Again, I'm forgetting the name, but I mean, that was about, I think, an Indian spy sent to Pakistan to, I don't know, do God knows what. And he falls in love, I think, with a local. And accuracy is of course, Indian media isn't known for that. But you would expect Bollywood to be maybe doing some sort of homework in researching, forget characters, but at least in researching the context in which they're placing their stories. But again, resorting to cliche because that's all that their writers see. Or maybe it's just feeding into that psyche. I mean, and I don't want to say that this Indian psyche is something that is wholly BJP RSS. I don't think we got movies that were favourable to Pakistan under Congress as well. So Bollywood as a whole, the industry, is almost hell-bent on making cinema that does not necessarily, forget preaching peace and brotherhood and sort of something that Pakistanis, and I'm not saying Pakistanis are sort of angels in this particular instance, but whenever you do hear from people from the industry, actors, so on and so forth, musicians, musicians in particular, Rahat Fateh Ali making his millions there, well, those days are gone. But especially you're always talking about Bhaichara and how sort of the industries and how through the art and through culture we need to come together and sort of get past all of these differences. Well, tell that to Javed Akhtar and Shaban Azmi. I'm not singling those two out. Sort of in the recent 3-day war, I don't know what sort of in times to come how this war is going to be alluded to. But when the first strikes did happen, you had a boatload of Indian celebrities, namely actors, of course. Ajay Devgan, Akshay Khanna, I think Kajol, a couple of these other ones, all saying Jai Hind and sort of we will not stand for terrorism, so on and so forth. I get it. I get that sort of you have to sort of back the armed forces, anything other than that, and sort of you'd be dragged to the Supreme Court because that's what India has become. I remember sort of it was, I think, the Pulwama, what's it called, shortly after when you had the Balakot strikes, Priyanka Chopra, Jai Hind, ! Priyanka Chopra Jonas, sorry. Jai Hind, ! The Indian flag, so on and so forth. But it's been a much more measured response from our people. And again, I don't care a fig for our actors and actresses. As I said, I rejected Lollywood a long time ago because there is nothing worthwhile coming from them. But I don't hear, they always strike a different tone. It's never jingoistic. It's never warmongering. It's never rah-rah. There's something I feel, and I think to their credit, I think this is the only thing I can give them credit for. It's just never been the kind of flag waving, thump your chest kind of patriotism. I don't see that from our people. It's always been, let us pray for the victims. Let us, let's strike, the middle ground. Let us somehow the other seek other means to address our contentions. But I don't see that from them. And that same, and let's not forget, in those very first strikes, whatever our respective governments and militaries may say, innocents were killed. Innocents were killed in Pahalgam. There's no doubt about that. But you didn't see Pakistanis going, sort of, if it is to be believed that, Pakistan was behind those attacks. You had Pakistanis on Twitter and all these platforms condemning the attacks. I don't think we've ever seen them say, did we see Indians condemn the Jafar Express attacks? No. I'm not one to be, condemning an entire society, or at least forget society, a culture and its, sort of artistic traditions. I'm not going to be that person, because if there is a good Indian movie or documentary out there, I will be the first to see it. But when it comes to content like this, The Diplomat and Sare Jahan Sacha, and then all of these other, sort of titles that have come out over the years, with your typical sort of, every Pakistani man is depicted as a chauvinist, a someone who has taken Islam to the very fringe, bearded with the sort of the lip shaved, prayer hat, sort of like, the scarf around his neck. Every other line is Subhanallah or Alhamdulillah. And they're always calling for, Cato-like, for the destruction of India. The women subservient, whipped. Come on. Bollywood, or whoever's producing this shit, can do better than that. Forget, sort of opening up a book, maybe that's beyond you. But just take the social media, Wikipedia, at the least. It's almost as comical as our depictions, Pakistan's depictions in, for example, I was going to say Lenny Riefenstahl's, but Catherine Bigelow's Zero Dark 30. I mean, the way Pindi was shown. I mean, come on. I mean, sure, there are parts of Pakistan that look like that, but not Rawalpindi. And if you do have sort of, not American tourists, because we've had so many of them going around those parts, incident-free, but if you do have sort of Raymond Davis type characters, then expect trouble. And the reason perhaps I'm making this appeal, I don't know, is you often see, and I understand this because of the shared language, that lingua franca, Urdu, Hindi. A lot of people who are turning to these to these streaming platforms, maybe they're not going to be watching English content perhaps, and this is more accessible for them. So you often see sort of in the top 10 list of shows and of series and movies for Pakistan, it often has Indian content in the first at least 5. I understand that, it's the language thing. And also the shared culture. I mean, there are overlapping things there. But I mean, again, when you do see stuff like this, I can understand that there's a curiosity that you would want to watch this and maybe poke fun about it later on Twitter. Make fun about it on social media, on Facebook. Make all your memes, all the memes you want to. But I mean, I think that there has to be a point at which you do realize that this propaganda, because that's all it is starting to not only, get stuck in your craw, like it's starting to vex now. It is unbecoming of an industry that purports to be, what Bollywood is. I mean, if, for example, during wartime, America, Germany, Britain, they were producing all of those films, you could understand. I mean, sort of, it was at daggers drawn. I mean, World War II was going on. It made sense to be producing that content. During the Cold War, it made sense for Russia, USSR, and America to be producing that kind of content. But if we are to believe that sort of there is this Cold War, I mean, sort of us staring at one another over, the LOC. And it is sort of our artists, our writers, our poets, our actors who are supposed to be preaching, at least, on both sides, for a call to our, an appeal to our better angels. Then this is unbecoming. Shitty content like this will appeal, of course, to your home base. I mean, I'm sure it'll give people, the RSS a hard-on to be seeing Pakistan sort of foiled at every turn. But enough. I mean, sort of don't humor them. Don't watch this stuff. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. Yeah, I think there is one thing to say, at least on this note. I fail to understand at least this aspect of Pakistani artists. We definitely have a chip on our shoulder. I mean, in light of this juggernaut that is Bollywood, Lollywood pales in comparison, and it will never ever reach those heights. It won't. We need to accept that. We don't even need to emulate that kind of film. Maybe we can find our own sort of voice. But one thing that I don't understand about Pakistanis, and I'm going to, go back to those two people I mentioned in particular, Javed Akhtar and Shabana Azmi. Why are we so desperate for their, for their approval? Not just them, but sort of everyone else from India. It's like sort of, an actor will, if he's made it, he or she has made it if they've starred in a Bollywood film. Otherwise, they're of no worth or consequence. Whenever Javed Akhtar or Shabana Azmi or any of those sorts, those two in particular, whenever they've kind of made their way to Pakistan, they've never had anything good to say. I mean, even when they're here, they sound off. And then you have these Pakistani actors dropping to their feet, sort of hanging on every word. I mean, shame on you. I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, I don't know why we cannot find anyone else in this world to invite to these events. You just always have these two. Number one, that was one thing. Number two, another thing that I fail to understand, the powers that be have a lot of money. I won't mention that particular department that's responsible for producing, favorable content, but those guys have very, very deep pockets. Why has none of that money been directed towards producing content, producing, films or TV series or documentaries that counter this Indian narrative? I mean, if India, and I understand, sort of the kind of budgets that Bollywood has, the kind of money that they generate, Pakistan just doesn't have that kind of dough. So that's where they can sort of produce hundreds of films a year where you can barely put out 10. But if the powers that be are listening, why are we not producing films about Pakistan, the 65 war, the 71 war, forget even war movies. I don't want to watch any of that stuff. But why are you not producing stuff that is countering this narrative? For example, if they're putting out a movie about how their spies apparently thwarted your nuclear plans, you put out a movie that maybe, you guys did something. If they're putting out movies about how, what's it called? Hrithik Roshan, in the terrible CGI that they had in that movie, flying around, blowing up Pakistani helicopters and attacking terrorist bases. Put out a film on Balakot, for example, on that, or any of these things. We've always prided on ourselves on our air superiority. Show me one movie. What was that? Parwaz Hai Junoon? Who gives a shit about shit movies like that? Make better stuff. I don't know. We're always at 6s and 7s. We're always trying to play catch up. We're always just scratching our heads, or even worse, scratching our balls. We're just trying to figure out what to do. Whereas everyone else, they're always light years ahead. So yeah, Pakistanis, if I see you guys sort of with any of these Indian movies in your top 10, like if Sare Jahan Se Acha makes it to your top 10 on, sort of the most viewed on Netflix, then you guys just sold it. Nothing else I can say.